Hello everyone, it's Daniel from TechMind Factory and welcome to this next video from the series called IdentiSphere Explorer. In this video, I would like to do a comprehensive overview of Microsoft Entra External ID. So let's start. So let's do a short introduction. For those of you who are not aware what happened, Microsoft actually released the next generation of Azure AD B2C, which is Microsoft Entra External ID. And I know it can be confusing because Entra External ID is also available in workforce tenants. However, when we talk about Microsoft Entra External ID, we have actually in mind the tenant for CIAM scenarios, so for customer identity and access management. So I think it's better to call it Microsoft Entra External ID for customers or CIAM. However, that's how it is. Like it's called Microsoft Entra External ID and it's available in both products. I mean, like in the workforce tenant to make it possible to, provide external access to your applications. And also it's a standalone product or tenant which you can use to secure your applications that are actually provided to your customers and external users. And that will be the focus in this video. So I would like to touch on this very important fact related to Azure AD B2C, okay? So the thing is that Microsoft Entra External ID is successor of Azure AD B2C and no new features will land into Azure AD B2C anymore, okay? So Azure AD B2C will still be there, so you still can use it. However, there are two important details that Microsoft provides that you should be aware of. So basically starting from May 1st, 2025, you will not be able to create new Azure AD B2C tenants. Okay, so there will not be a possibility to create new Azure AD B2C tenants from the Azure portal. And the thing is that Microsoft is committed to continue supporting Azure AD B2C, as you can see. Okay, so Microsoft will support Azure AD B2C at least until May 2030. Okay, and more information about migration paths and what to do, how to migrate to the new platform, this will be also provided by Microsoft. It's in progress. But the thing is that if you have Azure AD B2C currently in use, you can still use it without any issues. It will be supported, it's there, it will not disappear immediately. But please be aware that no other and new features will land in this product. And the thing is that you will not be able to create Azure AD B2C tenants anymore starting from May 1st, 2025. At least that's the information officially provided by Microsoft in the documentation. Okay, so in this video, I would like to do a comprehensive overview of this new product, show you some features, capabilities, to make sure that you are aware what is possible, what is not possible yet, and make a good decision whether Microsoft Entra External ID is a good choice, okay? So let's start with user authentication journeys and this new approach, okay? And in this video, I will also do some overviews in Entra Admin Center. I will also present some demos. But the thing is that, as you probably remember, in Azure AD B2C, which was a quite mature product, you could use something what was called custom policies. So those beautiful XML files that you could actually use to implement those customized user authentication journeys, okay? So obviously you could use user flows like the standard approach where you were selecting different things in the Azure portal, but to build really, I would say, customized and extended flows in B2C, you had to use custom policies. In the new platform, there are no custom policies anymore. I mean, like no XML files, nothing like this. So if you think about, like moving your custom policies to the new platform, there is no chance to do it. There is also no like migration path for that. I mean, like there is no magic tool that will enable you to transform those custom policies into flows in the Microsoft Entra External ID actually. Okay, so you will have to actually build those flows from scratch with the new approach, which is actually similar to what we saw in B2C in the basic configuration. So in the new product, we just configure user flows in Microsoft Entra External ID. So now let's open Microsoft Entra Admin Center so I can show you those flows, okay? So here is Microsoft Entra Admin Center, and this is actually the place where you can access this new product. And before I will present some user flows and this new approach, I want to make it clear that when it comes to a new product, there is actually another way of creating this. So if I actually, open identity here and overview, from there, as you can see, I can click manage tenants, and obviously I can click create tenant. And here I can decide whether I want to create workforce tenant or external tenant, okay? And that's very important. So to create Microsoft Entra External ID for customers, you select external tenant, okay? You click continue, and then you provide the name of your tenant, the domain name, you connect subscription. So something similar as it was in case of Azure AD B2C. So that's very important. So I want to make sure that here there is no confusion. So Entra External ID is available in two forms. It's available in Workforce Tenant to make it possible to secure those external applications for partners, but also Entra External ID is standalone tenant directory that you can use to create actually the directory for your customers, for external users, okay? Like it was in case of Azure AD B2C. Perfect. So right now, if we scroll up and we select user flows, so here actually under identity, if you scroll down to external identities, you will see that underneath you have user flows section, okay? And that's actually the tab where you can define those authentication flows. So instead of using custom policies from the Azure AD B2C. So here, if I click new user flow, I can define new user flow, as you can see. So I can sign in either with email and password or email and one-time passcode. I can also collect some additional attributes on the sign up page. I can also define custom attributes just for you to know. And once I create such flow, it will be visible here. So I can open this flow, and as you can see, under identity providers, I can say, hey, I want to use email with password instead of email and one-time passcode, basically. I can also click manage identity providers, and here I can select which additional identity providers I want to support. An important fact is that you can use Google, Facebook, Apple. You can also sign in with standard Microsoft accounts like Hotmail accounts. You can use one-time passcode, that's what I mentioned. And you can also integrate with standard Microsoft Entra ID tenants. So if you invite a person from external Entra ID tenant as a guest to this tenant, this person will be able to sign in with existing credentials from this home tenant, okay? So it's actually simplified than it was in the Azure AD B2C. If we select custom tab here, you can see that we can also configure federation with external identity providers using OpenID Connect or SAML. Or WS Federation. And the thing is that here, if you have a need to actually configure this external identity provider, if you select OpenID Connect, you can provide the configuration. It's like a standard approach. You have to provide issuer URI, client ID, client authentication scope, response type, and so on and so forth. And also under claims mapping, you can provide the claims that you want to map from the ID token that will be returned by this external identity provider. Now, important fact is that there is an important limitation. So in Azure AD B2C, you could customize actually how this mapping will look like. You could configure this mapping, okay? Here, you do not have such possibility. You have standard set of OpenID Connect claims, and that's it. There is no possibility to, add some custom claims from external identity providers into tokens from Entra External ID. Okay, so we only can use this standard set of OpenID Connect claims. That's very important. That's the limitation, at least for now, at the moment of recording this video. Perfect. So once we create actually this user flow, what is also important to be mentioned is the fact that in Azure AD B2C, for those of you who used Azure AD B2C, in Azure AD B2C, actually you created custom policies, and in the application configuration for the integration with Azure AD B2C, you had to specify which custom policy actually you want to use for authentication, for registration, profile edit, and so on and so forth, okay? In the new product, actually, it's different. So you create the user flow, and once the user flow is created, under applications, you specify which applications that you have in your tenant will use this sign-in flow, okay? Or this authentication flow. So as you can see here, for instance, I have my demo application for Microsoft Entra External ID, which I will show you in a minute. And because of the fact that this application is correlated with this user flow, I don't have to provide any information in the source code that, hey, use this user flow, that user flow, and so on and so forth. Like Entra will automatically assign this application to this user flow, and then I will be redirected to the correct flow when calling authorized endpoint. That's very important. So no custom policies and no, custom policies configuration in the application configuration actually. Okay, perfect. So that's one thing. So here under applications, I have to do this assignment. And obviously, once I configure such user flow, I can also, go to user attributes. Here I can define additional attributes that will be collected on the sign up page. I mentioned that you can also, use custom attributes. You can define them under manage user attributes. And actually, you can click run user flow button to test this flow. And before I will do it, because I have it integrated with my web application, important fact is that you can also actually add localization, so you can customize languages. And also there is something what is called page layouts, actually, okay? So here you can basically define different set of attributes that will be displayed, for instance, on the sign up page. Yeah. So this is something what I will explain in a minute when showing the authentication flow. Okay. So once we have this flow ready, we can actually see it in action. So let me switch to the web application now. So here is my Blazor web application, and this application is secure with Microsoft Entra External ID. If I click reports, I can see information that I have to authenticate first. So I will click login button, and now I'm redirected to authorized endpoint of Entra External ID. Let me select use another account because I want to show you the full login flow. Okay, so this is the login page that is displayed. As you can see, it's customized a little bit. I will talk about branding in this video later. But the thing is that here I can provide my email address. If I don't have account, I can click no account, create one. Here I have to provide the email address. Then OTP code will be sent to this email address. And if it's correct, sign up page will be displayed with all the attributes that we specified in Entra Admin Center for user attributes to be collected. Okay, that's what I was showing in the Entra Admin Center. And the thing is that we don't have actually the possibility to control or modify this flow here as it was in case of Azure AD B2C, okay? That's the, I would say, hard-coded flow. So we cannot add any middle pages here or, some redirections, additional things. Obviously, we can customize a CSS file for those pages to customize different things. But I mean, we cannot create such advanced flows as it was possible with Azure AD B2C. So for instance, we cannot, split authentication flow, like on one page, user is providing all the details for the sign up page. On the second page, user is providing the password. And on the third page, something else. You know what I mean? So the thing is that this flow is static. We cannot customize it. We cannot change it as it was possible with custom policies in case of Azure AD B2C. And obviously, there is a possibility to use native authentication API, which I will describe in this video too. But the thing is that if you want to use this browser-based version, you have to go with such flow. No customization, unfortunately. So if I click back and I will provide my email address like this, I will provide my password. Before I will click it, please notice that here we have this link forgot password. And again, the OTP code will be sent to our email address. If we select forgot password, we have to provide this code, and then we will be able to reset the password. So now if I click sign in, and I will confirm that I want to stay sign in, I'm redirected back to my Blazor application. As you can see, here is greeting, hello Daniel. And now if I go to reports tab, I can open it because of the fact that I'm authenticated user now. Okay? Simple as that. So just to summarize, when it comes to authentication flows, for now, we do not have any possibility to customize those flows. I'm not talking about the branding because, as you saw, you can add logo or change the background, but I'm talking about customization of those flows, as it was really powerful when it comes to Azure AD B2C. So with custom policies, we could customize those different flows. We could adjust what's happening in the flow. Here, it's static flow. We cannot change it, okay? So that's about the user flows. Let's get back to our presentation. So I mentioned that there is no possibility to actually modify the flow for login or registration. But the thing is that in Microsoft Entra External ID, there is a possibility to actually customize the experience, okay? And what I mean by that is, for instance, the scenario where we would like to call external service after user successfully authenticated. For instance, to block authentication operation, okay? Or we could call external service to validate the attributes that user provided on the sign-up page to block registration operation. So those kinds of things are possible to be implemented in the new platform using custom authentication extensions. So now let's open Microsoft Entra Admin Center and let's see what's possible actually when it comes to custom authentication extensions. So when we open Microsoft Entra Admin Center and our external ID tenant for customers, under external identities, when we select custom authentication extensions, that's the section where actually we can define those custom authentication extensions. So if we click create a custom extension, we can see that there are 4 different events for which we can actually configure those custom extensions. So first one is token issuance start. So here, actually, what we can do, we can call external service once user is successfully authenticated. We can provide details about the user, and also we can include additional claims in the ID or access token that is returned by Microsoft Entra External ID. Okay, so this can be really helpful in the situation where you need to, for instance, include some custom roles in the token that is returned to the application. You can achieve it with custom extension and token issuance start event. The next one, which is at the moment of recording this video in preview, is email OTP send. Okay, now, that's related to branding, but I want to touch on this because here we talk about custom authentication extensions. So with this event, we can call our external API to send customized email message with OTP code. Okay, so we have the possibility to customize those emails that are sent to customers with OTP codes, for instance, during the sign-up flow for email verification. And 2 more, there is attribute collection start and attribute collection submit. So when it comes to attribute collection start, we have the possibility to call external service to load some attributes, to preload them actually before the sign-up page, for instance, is loaded and displayed. And attribute collection submit is actually called and triggered when user clicks continue button or register button, let's say. Yeah, so it can be really helpful on the sign up page where we want to validate information provided by the user, and potentially when we want to block registration operation. So we want to prevent user to be registered. So in this case, we can also use attribute collection submit event. Okay. And the thing is that if I get back to those custom authentication extensions, I've already created one. So as you can see, I have one custom authentication extension for token issuance start event. And it means that when I will be signing in to my web application, Entra External ID will call my API, which is hosted with Azure Function actually in the Azure cloud, and will pass information about the user. And for this user, I will include custom roles in the ID token. Okay, so I want to show you this right now when it comes to authentication flow. So let's get back to the web application. Let's check what's included in the ID token. So here is my Blazor web application. I'm authenticated already. And just to align the knowledge. So once I'm successfully authenticated, Entra External ID, before returning the token to the application, is calling my Azure function that is hosted in the Azure cloud. My Azure function returns information about the custom roles, and this information is included in the ID token that is returned to the application. So now on the reports tab, when I click display financial report, we can see that here I can check whether a user is authenticated. But what is more important is information about the claims. So if I expand the claims, we can see that under claims here, I have this custom roles claim, and it includes the information about the custom role. So in this case, sales manager. Okay. So with this custom authentication extension, I can include additional claims in the access and ID tokens that are returned to applications. So in this case, I have this sales manager custom role included, and now my application can potentially do some authorization decisions. Now when I will disable this application, I want to show you really quickly Azure function code. So this is my Azure function. And obviously when it's called, this Azure function is called by Entra External ID with authorization header in the request, okay, in the header. And the thing is that, first of all, we have to verify an access token, we have to validate it, and if request is authorized, then this function app can potentially call some additional system to grab information about the user and return information about additional claims, okay? And then Entra will include those claims in the ID or access token. So now let's get back to Entra Admin Center. I want to show you last thing when it comes to those custom claims. Okay, so the thing is that configuration of custom authentication extension in Entra Admin Center is one thing, but also we have to tell Entra like, hey, I want to use this custom authentication extension when users will be authenticating in this specific application. Okay, so in this case, as you can see, under Enterprise applications, I have my demo application that I registered. So this is my Blazor application actually. And under single sign-on here in this place, this is actually the place where I can add additional claims to the token. So if I click add claims, you can see that under additional claims, I have custom roles claim. And below under advanced settings, you can see that I have my custom claim provider here, which is actually token and enrichment extensions function app. So the function app that will be called. And those attributes will be returned by this function app: custom roles, API version, and correlation ID. And now I want to include this information as a claim in the resulting token that will be returned. So that's why here, as you can see, I have custom roles added. When I click add new claim here, and I will expand this, you can see that here I can select this custom claims provider dot custom roles, okay? And here I can provide the custom name of the claim, and this name will be used actually as a name of the claim in the ID token that is returned by the application. Okay, perfect. So now let's get back to our presentation. Great, so now let's talk about branding customization in Microsoft Entra External ID. So let me jump into the Entra Admin Center to provide a couple of more details here. So in the Entra Admin Center under User Experiences, when we select company branding, we have access to this section actually, where we can customize the look and feel of our login and registration pages. The first important information is that Entra provides different languages support. So when I click add browser language, here I can customize actually the experience per different language. That's something really beneficial. So as you can see, I can do it. But for now, let me close it and let me actually edit default sign-in experience. So when I click edit, this page is open. I can also open this page here, so default sign-in page. Okay, and I can click edit and I will land on the same page. And now here, what I can do, I can provide different things around branding. So for instance, I can change the background image, as you can see, and that will be used on the pages. I can change the page color, background color. So as you can see, I selected this color, and that's why I have this like orange background on the login page. When I click layout here, I can decide how actually the layout will be presented when the login or registration page will be displayed to the user. So it can be either full screen background for the template or partial screen background. I can show or hide header. I can show or hide footer. That's something that can be beneficial here. And also important fact is that I can upload CSS file with my changes. So I can adjust, like the look and feel, colors of the buttons, of the background, labels, and so on. This can be customized, and this CSS file is available to be downloaded and edit, and it's available for editing. When I click header, I can change the header logo, provide the image. I can also provide additional information under the footer. So for instance, privacy and cookies, terms of use. This can be really helpful. And this was not available in Azure AD B2C, as you probably remember. If you wanted to obtain something like this, you had to use actually custom branding, HTML and CSS files. So here you can define those links under the footer. And here under sign-in form, you can actually customize the sign-in page experience, okay? The look and feel. So you can add the banner logo, square logo, username hint text, and a couple of additional things, also for self-service password reset, okay? So here you can enable self-service password reset, so forgot password link, and here you can also customize what is displayed there when it comes to text. And that's actually this here. So under custom text, you can modify some of the labels that will be used in different pages. So when I click sign up page here, you can adjust the title, for instance. However, the thing is that it's still quite limited. So for instance, if you would like to customize error messages on the login page, you cannot do it. So actually, let me go to login page and show you this experience. Okay, so when I click login button, I'm redirected to login page provided by Entra External ID. And as you can see, I customize this look and feel. I have my TechMine Factory logo here. I have this orange background. And as I mentioned, with CSS file, I can also modify, the colors for fonts, for buttons, and so on and so forth. However, when it comes to, for instance, error messages modification, it's not possible yet. So here, for instance, if I type like test.tech.com, let's say, and I will click next, you can see that there is this error message display. We couldn't find an account with this email address. And the thing is that in many cases, you would like to customize this text. At the moment of recording this video, there is no possibility to do it actually. So if you are fine with that, that's fine. If you would like to customize this text, there is no place where you can do it yet in Microsoft Entra External ID. So when it comes to customization around those different messages that are displayed, or for instance when it comes to splitting those pages into different flows, as it was possible with custom policies in B2C. Right now, something like this is not possible using the browser experience, actually. Yeah, so it's only available in the native authentication API, with native authentication API, where actually you implement all those flows in your application, like mobile application, iOS or Android, but I will be talking about it soon. So that's about the branding. So as you can see, there is a potential behind it, but still it's quite limited for basic scenarios. It's good, but definitely if you are looking for more advanced branding scenarios and customization, it's not possible yet. Okay, so now let's talk about MFA and conditional access. So when it comes to Microsoft Entra External ID, there is a possibility to implement MFA for customer accounts. You have two possible options to do it. You can either use email MFA, so OTP code is sent to email address, user will have to provide this OTP, and boom, user is authenticated successfully and can enter the application. Or you can use text messages. So actually the OTP is sent to user to his phone, and user will have to provide the OTP code to enter the application. Please note that with text messages, there is additional cost behind it. Okay, with email, there is no cost, but with text messages for MFA, there is additional cost, which you can actually find in the official documentation for Microsoft Entra External ID. The big and good thing is that you can also use conditional access with Microsoft Entra External ID. So, for instance, instead of enabling multi-factor authentication for each application and making users to go through the verification process each time they are signing in, you can use conditional access. And for instance, you can configure user risk or sign-in risk, and then basing on the level, then you can trigger MFA. So that's something really beneficial. And now let's dive into MFA and conditional access policies and possibilities in Microsoft Entra External ID. When we open Entra Admin Center and we go to authentication methods under protection, we can see that text messages option is enabled, and also email OTP. Okay, so first of all, to use both methods, we have to enable them under authentication methods in Microsoft Entra External ID. And now when we select conditional access here, we can see that I have actually two conditional access policies configured. The first one is require MFA when accessing confidential data. That's for the step-up authentication. I will be talking about it in a couple of minutes in this video. So for now, let's focus on the second conditional access policy. Require MFA for all customers when user or sign-in risk, okay? So when I open this actually here, as you can see, that's the standard conditional access policy tab that is available also in the standard Entra ID tenant for workforce. And as you can see here, I can specify all the users or specific users. I can also specify target resources. So in this case, as you can see, it's my demo application for Microsoft Entra External ID. And under conditions, I included user risk and sign-in risk levels. So if there is user risk or the sign-in risk with medium level, then trigger MFA. So here under the grant, I have this require multi-factor authentication selected. Okay, and now actually what I can do, I can enable this custom conditional access policy here, and it will be enforced when accessing my demo web application. And obviously, if you want to require MFA from your customers or your external users every time they are accessing the application, you can always modify it, okay? So here in this conditional access policy, what you can actually do, you can remove all those conditions from there, and you can say, hey, I want my users to go through MFA every time they are accessing this specific resource, which is in this case a demo application for Entra External ID. Okay, so once you configure this, that's it actually. So when the user will be signing in, user will have to go through the MFA. Okay, so now just for tests, let me remove those conditions here. Okay, so I will disable user risk, let me click done. I will disable sign-in risk also. And now I will click save button, okay? So let's see this experience actually when it comes from the end user perspective, from the customer perspective. So here is my Blazor web application. I'm clicking login button, and this time I will select Juno account. I'm providing the password, and because of the fact that we configure conditional access policy to always require MFA, Juno is asked actually to provide the OTP code. An important fact is here, I want to mention this. The thing is that we can configure two methods for MFA in Entra External ID, at least for now. Either text messages or OTP sent to email address, okay? So as you can see, because of the fact that we enable two authentication methods, so text messages and email, user can either select one or the first option or the second option, okay? So in this case, because of the fact that Juno registered phone number previously, right now Juno can select this phone number and OTP will be sent to his phone. The thing is that if we only stay with one method, which is email, OTP will be always sent to the registered email and user will have to provide this code. The exception is that if we select email and OTP for authentication, so instead of using password for authentication, we will require users to always provide the codes that are sent to their email addresses, then user will not have to go through the MFA process. So there will be only one step. User is providing email, then OTP is sent to user's email, and after successful verification of the code, like Entra will redirect authenticated user to the application. Last thing is that if you decide to use text messages for MFA instead of emails, and user is not registered yet with his or her phone number in the system, Entra will trigger user to provide phone number with the country code. User will have to provide the phone, OTP will be sent to this phone, user will be verified, registered, and then user will be authenticated and redirected back to the application. So now, because of the fact that Juno is already registered in the system, we can provide the OTP code that was sent actually, and after successful verification, Juno is redirected back to the application. Okay, so that's actually about the MFA. So we can always require MFA. We can only require MFA when there is a sign-in risk or user risk with different levels. An important fact is that if we enable both authentication methods, so email and text messages, we will give this possibility for users to choose which MFA method they want to use. Either OTP sent to email addresses or OTP sent to their phone numbers. Okay, perfect. So let's get back to our presentation. So now let's talk about the feature that was not available in Azure AD B2C, which is step-up authentication. As we saw in the external ID, we can configure conditional access policies and we can require MFA, for instance, when there is sign-in risk. However, there can be a situation where user entered the application without going through the MFA actually, okay? Because there was no sign-in risk. And now the thing is that in the application, there can be a section which provides access to some confidential data, let's say financial report, okay? And the thing is that before user actually can enter this section and can access this data, we want the user to go through additional verification process, to go through the MFA actually. And this is where step-up authentication is helpful and conditional access authentication context in Microsoft Entra External ID. So now let me explain how it works and also let me show you that in action. So here is Admin Center again and our conditional access policies. And to access authentication context, we have to select tab called Authentication Context. And that's actually the place where we can define those contexts. And like authentication context is actually, you can think about it like about the protection of specific action which enables user to access confidential data. Okay, and for such action, we require user to go through the MFA. So as you can see, I created this authentication context called strong customer authentication with description, requires the user to use MFA, okay? There is nothing fancy in it, actually. When you create such a context, you have to select publish to apps and actually assign the ID. Why? Because you can have different kinds of authentication contexts, okay? I have this generic one, strong customer authentication context, but you can try to imagine the situation that you will have different kinds of authentication contexts in your solution, in your application, and maybe for those contexts, you want to use different kinds of MFA methods, let's say, okay? So as you can see, by clicking new authentication context, I can provide the name, description, okay? And here I can select identifier. Why this identifier is required? Because when I create this authentication context, now I have to utilize conditional access policies. So as you can see, I have this second conditional access policy. Require MFA when accessing confidential data. So actually, let me open this. As you can see, I require this for all the users. For my, where was it? I want to show you this. I want to require this for my authentication context. So under target resources, I select authentication context. And from there, I'm selecting this strong customer authentication context. Okay? So now, once I select it, under grant, you can see that I have require multi-factor authentication selected. Okay? So every time there is this authentication context in place, I require the user to go through MFA process. And now potentially you are wondering why there is no application here selected, only the target resource and this authentication context. So I want to show you this from the web application perspective. So the thing is that once user is authenticated and user will go through MFA, there will be additional claim included in the ID token, okay, which will indicate that user actually went through the MFA process. That's one thing. And the second thing is that when user is accessing confidential data or confidential section within the application can look into the ID token, and if there is this claim missing, so it means that user didn't go through MFA process, application will trigger Entra External ID to make user go through the MFA process. So before I will get back to the code, as you can see, I enabled this conditional access policy with authentication context. Let me go to app registrations. And here, when I open demo application for Microsoft Entra External ID, and I will go to token configuration, you can see that there is this claim I mentioned before, ACRS, okay? So this is basically the claim that contains the authentication context ID of the operations in the token, okay? So as you remember, when I created this authentication context, I selected C1 ID, and under ACRS claim, this C1 value should be stored when user went through the MFA process, okay? MFA verification. So I have to add this claim here, and now let's see what's happening on the application side. So here is my Blazor web application again. I'm clicking login button, and this time please note that I am not using MFA here. I'm only providing my password. I'm authenticated successfully, redirected back to the application. No MFA. And now I want to access reports and this financial report here. So I'm clicking display financial report button, and now my application is verifying two things actually. Whether I'm authenticated, which is true, I am authenticated. However, application is looking into ID token to check whether ID token contains ACRS claim with the value equals C1, okay? And now I can check whether step-up authentication was fulfilled. If user did not go through the MFA process, there is no ACRS claim with C1 value. So step-up is not fulfilled here. So I will have to go through the MFA process. So as we can see, I'm redirected to Entra External ID, And here I have to provide OTP code that will be sent to my phone actually, because I have only this authentication method registered for my user, which is actually using text messages. So here I have to provide the code that is actually sent to my phone right now. So I'm providing this. So 557753. I click verify button, and now I'm successfully redirected back to the application. And now when I click display financial report button, we can see that report was downloaded successfully, and now I can access it. So actually with step-up authentication, it's really it can be really beneficial when it comes to securing confidential sections and data in our applications. So that's possible with Microsoft Entra External ID using conditional access authentication contexts. And I think that many people will actually use this feature to additionally secure information in their applications. So that's it about step-up authentication. Let me get back to the presentation. Another great thing about Microsoft Entra External ID is the fact that we can utilize security groups and app roles, and we can benefit from actually using them. That's something that was missing in Azure AD B2C. There was no app roles functionality, and we could potentially use security groups, but to include information about the membership, we had to actually call our tenant through Microsoft Graph API in the custom policies. So right now it's built into the platform. So for instance, we can create different security groups. We can, like add members to those security groups and then include information about the membership in the tokens that are issued to applications. And the same is for app roles. So in the application specific context, we can define different kinds of app roles. We can assign those app roles to specific users. And then in the tokens, we will have this information in form of role claim. So that's very, I would say, beneficial. And I'm pretty sure that this will be broadly used by many people for authorization scenarios. So now let me show you app roles as an example here and how actually we can use them in our applications. So we are back to Admin Center, and when I open demo application for Microsoft Entra External ID, on the left side we can see this section called App Roles, okay? And that's the place where I can define application roles for my users. And I want to clarify one thing because maybe this can generate confusion actually. So what is the difference between security group and app role? The simple difference is that app roles are specific to application, so we create them in context of specific application. And when it comes to security groups, those are used at the tenant level actually, okay? So app roles cannot exist without the application, but we can, on the other side, define security groups independently of applications. So here, as we can see, I created two app roles by clicking Create App Role button. I have Manager role, okay? And I have Basic User role. Managers can access financial reports. Users have access to basic set of application functionalities, okay? And now the thing is that I can assign those roles to specific users. So how to do it? When I go to Enterprise Applications, and I will, from there, select Demo Application for Microsoft Entra External ID. Here, under Users and Groups, I can actually select specific users and assign them those roles, okay? The thing is, before I will do it, when I go to Properties, that's also something that can be beneficial. The thing is that in Entra External ID, we can change this assignment required to yes, and then only assigned people will be able to access the application. That's very important, okay? So if we want to limit access to only specific group of users, we can do it. So assignment required will be set to yes. And then under users and groups, we will have to directly add those people so they can access this application. But for now, I'm keeping this as no, because assignment is not required. The only thing I want to use here is to utilize app roles. So actually to add roles for specific users, when adding those users, I have to specify the role. So when I click add user, okay, I can select specific user from my directory and also select the role. As you can see, under the roles, I have basic user and manager. Those app roles I defined for my demo application for Microsoft Entra External ID. So now if I select the user, I select the role, user will land on this list with specific role assigned. And basically, that's it. Now, when it comes to application, those roles will be reflected in form of a role claim in the ID token. Okay, and the thing is that then application can look into those roles and can make authorization decisions. So that's actually really beneficial if you want to implement this, for instance, role-based access control in your application. So now let me get back to application and let's check the ID token content for one of those users. One more thing is the fact that you can assign multiple app roles to one user. Okay, that's something what I wanted to clarify. Now let's see the application. So here is the web application. I'm clicking login button and obviously I have to authenticate first. So I'm selecting my account, I'm providing the password and I'm successfully authenticated and redirected back to the application. Okay. And now, as we can see in the event called onTokenValidated, I can look into the ID token content. Okay. So let's look into this content. As we can see under roles claim, we can see that there is manager role included. Okay, so because of the fact that I assigned manager role to this specific user, then this information is included in the ID token. And also important fact is that I can include the same information in the access token. Okay, so the thing is that now when I will be calling my report API, let me show you that really quickly, I can add specific policy and authorized attribute require manager role. Okay, so here in my configuration for this web API, I can say that specify require manager role policy and require manager role here. So if I open this one, you can see that this specific policy will look into the role claim and will check whether there is manager role. So it will actually check whether in the access token there is a role called manager. And if user is manager, then it means that in the report controller, the report can be actually returned from this API. Okay, so this is really powerful because we can use it for authorization decisions. Okay, so let's get back to the presentation now. Another thing which is also important when it comes to authentication flows is actually integration with external identity providers. So with Microsoft Entra External ID, we have this possibility to actually extend authentication flows with additional authentication providers. So we can integrate with Google, Facebook, Apple, standard Microsoft Entra ID, and also Microsoft accounts. Okay, there is one thing about Microsoft Entra ID here. To sign in with the account from the standard Workforce Entra ID tenant, we have to invite this person as a guest account to our Entra External ID tenant. When we do it, then user from this Workforce tenant will be able to use his or her account from home tenant to actually enter the application. So now let's go to the admin center to explore all those identity providers. So under external identities, when we click all identity providers, this is actually the place where we can configure those integrations. So for instance, we can configure federation with Facebook, okay? And the thing is that, as I mentioned before at the beginning of this video, we have also the possibility to federate with additional identity providers using either OpenID Connect or SAML or WS federation, okay? So this is also doable. So if you need an integration with external identity providers, that's something that is possible to be implemented with Microsoft Entra External ID. Another feature, which in my opinion is a game changer, is native authentication support in Microsoft Entra External ID. So that's something that was not available with Azure AD B2C. So here, instead of using this browser redirection flow to authenticate users, we can actually build native UI for login and registration flows. So if you have iOS application, if you have Android application, instead of using this browser redirection experience for users where browser is open and they have to authenticate and then they are redirected back to application, you can actually use Microsoft Authentication Library and Native Authentication SDK to actually integrate with Microsoft Entra External ID. And you can create all those views like login page or registration page or forgot password page natively in your application. Okay, so at the moment of recording this video, two platforms are supported, so iOS and Android, and there is also a native authentication API possible to be used, but it doesn't support CORS yet. So it's not possible to use this API from the JavaScript. So now let me show you documentation and explore a couple of more things. So this is the official documentation for Native Authentication API in Microsoft Entra External ID. If we scroll down, we can see that, first of all, there is information when to use native authentication and what are the differences between using browser-delegated authentication and native authentication. But it's also important to see supported languages and frameworks. Obviously, for browser-delegated authentication, so for this redirection flow we saw with Blazor, for instance, many different kinds of frameworks and languages are supported, but for native authentication API, as we can see, Android is supported with Kotlin and Java, and iOS, macOS with Swift and Objective-C. For other languages and platforms, you can use our native authentication API. So actually, when I open this native authentication API, you can see that currently native authentication API endpoints don't support cross-origin resource sharing. That's what I mentioned before. However, the thing is that you can still look at this API and you can understand how those different endpoints were implemented to actually handle native authentication. Okay, so Microsoft right now is working on this native authentication API. So I expect that in the future, more platforms will be covered by Microsoft Authentication Library and this native authentication SDK, not only Android and iOS. So it's worth to look at this, but still, if you have some existing applications or applications for Android and iOS that should be implemented and secure with Microsoft Entra External ID, it's worth to look at native authentication API, because then you can craft those views to perfection and there is no redirection to the browser. Okay, so let me get back to the presentation now. Another enhancement that was added in Microsoft Entra External ID is support for device authorization grant flow. So let's discuss this flow really quickly. So when we open official documentation from Microsoft, for Microsoft Identity Platform, we can see that there is support for OAuth 2 device authorization grant flow, which is also supported by Microsoft Entra External ID. And this flow can be really helpful if you want to allow users to sign in to input constrained devices, such as smart TVs, IoT devices, or printers, okay? So basically, the thing is that user has to visit a web page in a browser on another device to sign in. And once the user signs in, the device is able to get access tokens and refresh tokens as needed. So if we scroll down here, we can see this flow explained, okay? So there is a client, so this is actually the application that can be launched on smart TV. And user agent is, for instance, a user phone. Okay, and the thing is that user is starting authentication flow here in this application, and application is asking user to complete authentication flow using another device. So on another device, user is opening specific URI, user is completing authentication flow, and once user is successfully authenticated, then this client application gets information about it and obviously receives access token, refresh token, and ID token. Okay, so basically that's how it works. And this is fully supported by Microsoft Entra External ID. The last thing I want to mention here is automation support and developer experience. So for those of you who work with Azure AD B2C custom policies, you probably know that, yeah, it was tough actually to solve everything, to debug those custom policies, and to verify what's going on in the authentication flows. And Microsoft wanted to actually, solve this issue. So that's why the new platform, which is Microsoft Entra External ID, was designed also keeping in mind the DevOps automation possibilities, okay? So the thing is that for Microsoft Entra External ID, there is a dedicated plugin for Visual Studio Code, which we can use to access some of the features in our tenant, like user flows, applications, or company branding. And also, we can use PowerShell scripts or Microsoft Graph API to create different kinds of resources in our tenant, like user flows or app registrations. So now let me open Visual Studio Code to show you actually some of those features. So first of all, let me start with this dedicated extension plugin for Visual Studio Code to manage resources in the Microsoft Entra External ID. So as you can see, I installed this extension. You can find it, it's free. And now when you authenticate successfully, you can access your tenant. So as you can see, I have my TechMine Factory for customers tenant. Here I can see all the applications. I can see the user flows here. I can open this user flow and see its definition. I can download it in form of JSON file, okay? I can also open company branding here and I can look into sign-in UI. So as you can see, also there is like a preview of my login page with the logo, with the background. So that's really helpful. So you can use this extension in the Visual Studio Code. Also, when I get back to files and automation topic, as I mentioned, you can automate different things in Entra External ID. I want to make it clear. Not everything is, I would say, crystal clear and completed, and still a lot of things are missing when it comes to automation, but I think that's a good direction. So for instance, what you can do, you can create user flows with local accounts in Microsoft Entra External ID using PowerShell scripts in Microsoft Graph API, okay? So if you actually prepare such scripts in the PowerShell, then you can use Azure DevOps pipelines or GitHub Actions to actually automate their creation in Entra External ID. So for instance, you can automate creation of user flows. You can automate creation of applications. You can also set up a company branding. However, with this script, to be honest, I had some issues. I couldn't make it work fully. So still, as I mentioned, it's not perfect experience. There is still, I would say, a bit confusion whether some features for automation are supported. But I think that that's a good direction actually, that we can, download those JSON files for user flows, that we can have those PowerShell scripts, and we can benefit from the automation. So as you can see, I have those PowerShell scripts. I can also configure basic conditional access policies in my tenant. So if you have multiple tenants and you want to make sure that in each tenant you have the same set of conditional access policies, you can keep them here in the source code repository. You can have this PowerShell script, and for instance, you can use Azure DevOps pipelines to automate deployment of those conditional access policies. So to summarize, there is a lot of things that should be added to this automation to make it, I would say, complete. But I think that's a good starting point, and fingers crossed for this development and expansion of this automation for Entra External ID. Great. So to summarize this video, I thought that it would be beneficial for others to actually also collect some additional important facts about this new platform from Microsoft. And this is obviously at the moment of recording this video. So that's why I strongly recommend monitoring official documentation for Entra External ID to check the status of those features. So first of all, there is no support for Microsoft Graph notifications, okay? For those of you who are not familiar with this feature, actually with Graph notifications, it's possible to send notification to external system or to API when something is happening in Entra directory, for instance. So let me put an example. When the new user is created in Entra tenant or when user profile is updated in the tenant, we can send such graph notification to external API to process this information. I thought that it would be supported with Entra External ID as it is in the standard workforce tenant, Entra ID tenant, but it's not. So if you would like to implement the scenario that you actually call some external service once user is registered in your tenant, it's not possible at this moment. So Microsoft Graph Notifications feature is not supported by Microsoft Entra External ID. You cannot use it at the moment of recording this video. No support for custom branding per application. Okay, as you saw, right now there is a company branding available, so we can actually customize the look and feel globally for the tenant, but there is no possibility to adjust the branding per application. That's something on the horizon. I don't know, to be honest, where it will be available, but at the moment of recording this video, you can only use one global branding for all the pages provided by Microsoft Entra External ID. You cannot use per app branding as it was possible with Azure AD B2C. No support for Microsoft Authenticator app. That's another thing that you should keep in mind. So for MFA right now, you can only use email or text messages. There is no support for Microsoft Authenticator app. I believe that that's something that will come in the future, but right now it's not possible to use it. So we will see. At the moment of recording this video, it's not available. No edit profile built-in page. That's something important to be mentioned. If you work with Azure AD B2C, you probably remember that there was this profile edit custom policy that you could use to edit user profile. With the new platform, there is no such possibility. If you want to implement a profile edit functionality, you have to build this page within your application and actually call Microsoft Graph API underneath to update user profile. Additional important fact is to mention here is that with this approach, you cannot actually update custom attributes of the user. You can only update default attributes in the user profile. That's a big limitation, I think, because if you use some custom extensions and you store information there that can be changed by the user, you will not be able to change it using this approach, at least not at the moment of recording this video. Okay, no support for OpenID Connect financial API like push authorization requests or token binding. So that's very important, especially in highly regulated industries. I think it would be beneficial to have at least some of those features like push authorization requests to hide authorization parameters from the browser and use the backend channel. And also it would be beneficial to have token binding or sender constraint, how it's called, to make sure that access tokens are actually bound to specific client application. At the moment of recording this video, there are no features like this. Moving forward, there is no support for editing specific error messages on the pages like a login page. That's what I mentioned when we were discussing the branding, okay? So for instance, if you would like to modify the information on the login screen that is presenting information that a user account does not exist, you cannot do it at the moment of recording this video. But I think many people will look into this, so maybe in the future it will be also possible. I didn't find any option like this. Limited support for automation, that's what I mentioned a few minutes ago. So there is some part of automation that can be used. We have those PowerShell scripts that can be used. There is support for creating user flows or app registrations using Microsoft Graph API, but still I strongly believe that that's only the beginning. And it would be great to see, I would say like a full stack for automating different things in Microsoft Entra External ID, like automating creating custom authentication extensions, or for instance, configuring identity providers. So different things. I strongly believe that this will come soon. but at the moment of recording this video, this automation is limited. No support for custom domain when using Facebook and Google identity providers. That's something important for you to know. So basically, in Microsoft Entra External ID, you can use custom domain for your login and registration pages, as it was possible with Azure AD B2C, okay? For instance, using front door in Azure Cloud. But the thing is that when you enable custom domain and you want to use Facebook or Google identity providers, you will not be able to use this custom domain. You have to still use the default tenant domain, which means that you will not be able to disable actually the default domain. That's a big limitation. You can find this information in the documentation provided by Microsoft. I hope that this will be fixed soon, but at the moment of recording this video, it's not possible to use custom domain with social identity providers. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you found it interesting and helpful, and I hope to see you in the next videos. Thank you so much for watching.